He was a man undone, left hollow by betrayal, by years of a love that promised forever, only to disappear overnight. His apartment echoed with silence, every room a reminder of the life he thought he was building, until it all collapsed in a single conversation. His wife had moved on. Not just emotionally, but physically, legally, spiritually. He was divorced, discarded, and drowning in a loneliness that even the daylight couldn't chase away. That's when she appeared. Not like a savior, not like a miracle, but like a quiet breath after holding your lungs still for too long. She didn't try to fix him. She didn't promise anything. She just showed up. With warm eyes and a voice that didn't press. With gentle questions and conversations that lasted until 3 a.m. With silences that didn't need to be filled. And slowly, brick by brick, she rebuilt him. Helped him believe again. Smile again. Trust again. But the thing is, you never really know what someone's hiding. Because while he was falling in love with her kindness, her wit, her grace, she was still bleeding inside. From a loss she never talked about. From a past she kept buried under practiced smiles and vague answers. From a pain so deep, even love had to knock gently at its door. He thought he was the broken one. He thought she saved him. But what he never realized, was that she was saving herself by saving him. And the truth she never spoke out loud might be the very thing that shatters them both. This is their story. A story of love. Of healing. And of the secrets we carry when we think no one's looking. Welcome to True Love Tales headquarters, where real stories find real hearts. If you're ready for a journey of healing, heartbreak, and the kind of love that leaves a mark, stay with us. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because the story is just beginning. She was never supposed to be part of his story. Emma Rivera lived a life just outside the spotlight. Never drawing too much attention, never lingering long enough to be asked the hard questions. Her world was quiet, carefully curated. A cozy apartment filled with secondhand books, fading photographs, and handwritten notes she never sent. Her mornings began with black coffee and silence, and her nights ended with the same. She edited other people's stories for a living, but she never dared to tell her own. Jake Carter, on the other hand, used to live out loud. He was the kind of man who filled a room without trying, until the day his world cracked in half. One signature on a divorce paper, and just like that, the 10 years he spent loving the wrong woman were reduced to memories and an empty ring box. His once steady hands, hands that built skyscrapers and drew blueprints with vision, now trembled with self-doubt. Every time he looked in the mirror, he didn't see a man anymore. He saw a failure. When they met, it wasn't fireworks. It wasn't magic. It wasn't fate. It was work. Jake had written a book, a half-hearted attempt at telling his story through fiction. A friend convinced him to publish it. Emma was the editor assigned to his manuscript. Their first meeting was in a cafe downtown. Rain tapped at the windows like it had secrets to spill. Emma sat across from him, quiet but observant. She didn't ask about the pain in his eyes. She didn't comment on the sadness clinging to his shoulders like a wet coat. She simply said, "Your story has good bones, but it's holding back. Like you're afraid to let it bleed." And for the first time in months, Jake felt something stir inside him. It wasn't attraction. Not yet. It was recognition. He didn't know what Emma had seen in him that day, or what part of her soul whispered to his. But their conversation started stretching beyond the margins of his manuscript. Meetings turned into emails. Emails into late-night phone calls. They didn't flirt. They didn't play games. They spoke with a kind of honesty only the broken understand. Jake told her about the affair. About waking up one morning to find a suitcase by the door and a cold, "I'm sorry," scribbled on a sticky note. Emma listened. She never offered advice. Only presence. What Jake didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Emma's silence held more pain than his words ever could. Years before she met him, Emma had been a mother. A young mother, scared but hopeful. Her daughter's name was Lily. Just 3 years old. Bright-eyed. Curious. She called butterflies sky fairies and believed chocolate milk could fix any sadness. One winter afternoon, they got in the car. Emma was driving. It was snowing. Just a few miles from home, a drunk driver ran a red light. Lily never woke up. Emma survived. But the version of her that laughed loudly, that danced barefoot in the kitchen, that sang lullabies, she died in that crash. What came after was a blur. Pills. Counseling. Silence. A marriage that couldn't withstand the weight of grief. And then, nothing. Just years of drifting. Of surviving. Of learning how to smile again without meaning it. So when Jake spoke of loss, Emma nodded. Not because she understood his story, but because she was living her own. And yet, she never told him. Not then. Because she had spent so long hiding her pain behind politeness. She didn't know how to bring it to the surface anymore. She was terrified that if she said Lily's name out loud, she would unravel in front of him. So instead, she saved him. One conversation at a time. One late-night call at a time. She laughed at his jokes. Reminded him he wasn't broken. Told him his story mattered. But deep down, she wished someone would say the same to her. They spent hours walking through the city, talking about everything and nothing. Jake found himself waiting for her texts. Emma found herself smiling for real again. There was no grand declaration. No sweeping romantic moment. Just two people, slowly building something fragile. Something honest. But fragile things break easily. And Emma knew, the truth she carried might be the one thing that could ruin everything. The question was, would she ever have the courage to tell him? Or would she keep hiding, even from the one person who finally made her feel seen? This was the beginning of something. But beginnings, no matter how beautiful, are only as strong as the secrets they carry. And Emma's secret was waiting. Ready to rise. Ready to break. Ready to change everything. They say love grows in silence, in the unspoken moments between words, in the look that lingers a second too long, in the way two people breathe a little easier when they're near each other. For Jake and Emma, it wasn't fireworks that pulled them closer. It was familiarity. Safety. That quiet understanding that neither of them had the energy for pretend anymore. It started small. A habit of texting, "Good morning," and "You okay?" An accidental 3-hour phone call that ended at 2:47 a.m. A cup of coffee left on Jake's porch when he mentioned a rough day. And then, without realizing it, they began to rely on each other. Jake opened up first. He told Emma about the day his marriage ended, not the legal part, but the emotional one. The moment he realized he had spent years loving someone who never really saw him. He confessed how empty he felt afterward. How every conversation now felt like walking through fog. How loneliness had become his only reliable companion. Emma listened, always quietly. But her eyes said she understood. She never shared her story. Not fully. Not yet. Instead, she offered pieces of herself in metaphors and half-truths. "I used to believe in happy endings," she said once, as they watched the sunrise over the bay. "But sometimes, you just learn to be grateful for peaceful middles." Jake didn't press. He figured she'd tell him when she was ready. But she wasn't ready. Not even close. Still, something was blooming. Fragile, but real. Their first touch wasn't planned. They were walking together, her hands cold, his jacket too thin for the wind. Without thinking, he reached over and took her hand. It fit. No sparks, no music swelling. Just, peace. She didn't pull away. That night, he lay awake replaying the way her fingers curled around his. The warmth of it. The simplicity. The hope. Then came the kiss. It was late, and Emma had stayed after helping him sort through a stack of old photographs for a book project. They were laughing about something he said, something small. And then, the silence crept in. The kind that felt heavy, filled with everything neither of them had the courage to say. He leaned in slowly. She didn't stop him. Their lips met. Soft. Unsure. A question more than an answer. And when he pulled away, she looked at him like she was trying to memorize his face. But something shifted after that. Emma began to withdraw, not completely, but just enough. Her smiles were still there, but they didn't reach as far. Her texts became shorter. Her laughter, a little quieter. Jake noticed. And he asked, once. "Did I do something wrong?" She shook her head. "You didn't do anything. That's the problem. You're kind. And safe. And real. And I'm not sure I know how to be any of those things." Jake didn't understand. Not fully. But he didn't push her. What he didn't know was that Emma had received a letter that week. One she'd been dreading for years. It was from the rehab facility she checked into after her daughter died. Someone had found one of the letters Emma wrote to Lily while she was there. It had been misplaced, locked in a drawer. Now, it was being returned to her. Opening that envelope was like reopening the wound she had spent so long trying to bury. She read her own words, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "I don't know how to live without you. But I'm trying. I promise I'm trying." And suddenly, she wasn't sure she deserved the happiness that was forming with Jake. Because she had never told him. Not about Lily. Not about the accident. Not about the guilt that still wrapped around her throat when she looked in the mirror. She was falling for him. Deeper than she intended. But how could he love her, if he knew the whole truth? Jake, meanwhile, was falling too. He started bringing her flowers without a reason. He talked about taking her to meet his mother. He showed her the plans for the children's library he was designing. And then, one night, he said it. "I think I'm falling in love with you." Emma froze. The silence after his words was deafening. She wanted to say it back. She did. But something inside her panicked. Because love meant exposure. Vulnerability. Truth. And she wasn't ready for that kind of nakedness. Not yet. So she did the only thing she knew how to do when love got too close. She pulled away. The next morning, she left his apartment early. No kiss. No note. Jake stood at the window, watching her walk down the street, disappearing into the gray of the city. He didn't know that the closer he got to her heart, the closer he was to everything she was afraid to reveal. And deep within Emma's soul, the battle raged. Between the woman she was trying to become. And the broken mother who never forgave herself for surviving. The love was real. The connection was true. But the secret? The secret had teeth. And it was getting closer to the surface. Jake didn't call her that day. He wanted to. He stared at his phone for hours, scrolling past her contact, rereading their last messages, replaying her silence. But something in her eyes the night before, something distant, haunted, told him she needed space. He told himself it was temporary. That she'd reach out when she was ready. But days passed. Then a week. Emma didn't text. Didn't return his calls. She vanished the way people do when they've been running from their past and it finally catches up to them. What Jake didn't know was that Emma hadn't disappeared. She had simply broken. In her apartment, curtains drawn, she held the letter from the rehab clinic in one hand and an old photo of Lily in the other. Her daughter's smile, forever frozen in time, mocked the lie she was living. The lie she had built her entire relationship with Jake on. Because no matter how deeply she cared for him, how much she wanted this new life, she couldn't let him love someone he didn't fully know. She had spent years hiding from herself. From her memories. From the night of the crash. The nightmares had returned. She saw it again and again. The sound of screeching tires. The weight of the steering wheel jerking under her hands. The cold of the snow. The silence in the back seat. She still remembered whispering Lily's name. Again. And again. Begging for her to answer. And when the paramedics arrived, and they pulled her daughter's tiny body from the wreckage, something in Emma's soul simply stopped. She had spent years pretending she was whole. She wasn't. So now, standing at the edge of something beautiful with Jake, something real, she knew she had to tell him. Even if it cost her everything. So she wrote him a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter. She told him everything. The pregnancy. The fear. The joy. The accident. The years of drowning. The silence that became her sanctuary. And the guilt that built walls around her heart. She wrote about Lily. How she used to sing herself to sleep. How she loved red balloons. How she called Emma her sunshine mama. She told Jake that falling for him had been a gift she never expected, and never thought she deserved. And then she wrote 6 final words. "I understand if you can't stay." She mailed it. And then she waited. Jake received it 2 days later. He read it sitting in the same cafe where they first met. It shattered him. Not because he judged her, but because he finally understood the silence. The carefulness. The hesitation in her eyes every time he got too close. She wasn't afraid of love. She was afraid of what love would uncover. Jake didn't call right away. He needed time to sit with her pain. To hold it properly. He drove to the cemetery that night. Found Lily's name carved in soft stone under a small tree. He left a red balloon there. No note. Just the gesture. And then he went home. Emma didn't expect him to show up. She thought her letter had ended them. So when she opened her door and saw him standing there, soaked from the rain, a red balloon string still tied to his wrist, she broke. She collapsed into him. And for the first time, she let the tears fall. She told him about the nights she screamed into her pillow. The mornings she couldn't get out of bed. The fear that if she ever truly let herself be happy again, the universe would take it away. Jake didn't say anything. He just held her. Tighter than he ever had. Later that night, they sat in silence on her floor, surrounded by candles and the ghosts of their pasts. He took her hand, kissed her scarred knuckles, and whispered. You don't have to hide from me. Not anymore. But healing isn't linear. And the truth doesn't fix everything overnight. There were still moments of doubt. Still nights where Emma flinched at her own reflection. Still days when Jake wondered if he was enough to hold this much weight. But something had shifted. They had seen each other. Truly seen. And in that moment, they knew. They could walk through the fire. Together. Time didn't heal all wounds. But it gave them space to breathe. In the weeks that followed, Emma and Jake rebuilt something new, something neither of them had ever known before. Not the passionate whirlwind kind of love, or the storybook fairy tale romance. What they created was quieter, deeper, forged in truth and scar tissue. They didn't pretend it was easy. Some mornings, Emma woke up already on the edge of tears, and Jake learned how to hold her without asking why. Some nights, Jake stared at the ceiling, haunted by fears he couldn't name, and Emma would reach for his hand, grounding him in silence. They attended grief counseling together, not because Jake had lost Lily, but because Emma wanted him to understand the corners of her world she hadn't let anyone enter before. Emma, for the first time, began to say Lily's name out loud again. She started small. A story here. A memory there. She used to sing, Twinkle Twinkle, in the wrong order and insisted it was the remix. Her favorite color changed every day, but Tuesday was always purple. She would have liked you, you're gentle. She loved gentle people. Jake didn't try to fix her. He simply listened. And Emma began to heal, not because she had moved on, but because she finally let someone walk beside her without trying to carry it all alone. Seasons changed. Emma started writing again, really writing. Not just editing other people's words, but telling her own story. Piece by piece. Jake's architectural firm offered him a major opportunity, a chance to design a children's grief and healing center, funded by a local nonprofit. The project was deeply personal. And without hesitation, he named it Lily's Light. When he showed Emma the blueprint, she cried for the first time in front of someone without shame. And when the ribbon was cut 9 months later, Emma stood beside him, holding his hand, as the sun lit up the sign, a space for hope, for healing, and for hearts learning how to love again. They didn't need vows or rings or ceremonies to prove what they already knew. But on a quiet autumn evening, beneath the tree where Lily was buried, Jake knelt down. Not with a question, but with a promise. I know you're not whole. I'm not either. But I think we can be whole, together. Emma didn't hesitate. Yes, she whispered. Always. They never pretended life would be perfect. Some anniversaries still came with tears. Some nights still felt heavy. But now, they had each other to share the weight. And sometimes, love doesn't mean erasing the past. Sometimes, it means carrying it gently, in both hands, and choosing to live anyway. Emma saved him after his divorce, but what she didn't know was that Jake had come to save her too. Together, they built a life not despite their pain, but through it. There is no timeline for healing. No perfect love story untouched by loss. But sometimes, the most beautiful beginnings come from the ashes of heartbreak. And sometimes, two broken people don't just find love. They find home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to True Love Tales for more emotional journeys just like this. Comment below, have you ever found unexpected healing through love? We'd love to hear your story. And remember, even the most shattered hearts can still beat again.